You'll get the hang of that. One for you, one for me.
What is it?
It lets you see the bigger picture. People think there's one reality, but there's loads of them all snaking off like roots, and what we do on one path affects what happens on other paths. There's messages in every game, like Pac-Man. Do you know what PAC stands for? PAC, Program and Control. He's Program and Control Man. The whole thing's a metaphor. He thinks he's got free will, but really, he's trapped in a maze. All he can do is consume. He's pursued by demons that are probably just in his own head. And even if he does manage to escape by slipping out one side of the maze, what happens? He comes right back in the other side. People think it's a happy game. It's not a happy game. It's real, and we live in it.
Oh, welcome to the Binge List. My name is Paul Chappell, your host, and today we are journeying down the rabbit hole with Bandersnatch on Netflix. And when I say journey down a rabbit hole, I'm obviously referencing Lewis Carroll, because a Bandersnatch is a mystical creature in one of his Alice in Wonderland stories from 1872, and specifically Through the Looking Glass, which this show does reference. And it's kind of hard to explain what this show is about. Ostensibly, it's an episode of Black Mirror. So if you're any way experienced with Black Mirror, it's a very bleak science fiction show. It's kind of like the Twilight Zone, but a lot more dark. Of course, Twilight Zone did have some dark episodes too. But this particular show exists on what I would term meta level. Well, that college education is coming in handy. Anyway, any philosopher would tell you a meta level is a self-referential abstraction of reality. And in this show, we got a character named Stevan Butler, and the setting is I think it's London, 1984. He's a kid who's programs in his spare time. He likes video games. And on this particular day, when the story opens, he has an interview with a software company that makes games for like the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum, and a lot of those old computer systems you millennials probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But he has this interview, and that's fine. But the game he wants to present to this software company is a game called Bandersnatch. Now, this actually has a root in reality, because I think in the same year, 1984, a software company called Imagine Software had a game that was going to be released called Bandersnatch, and it never was released because they filed for bankruptcy that same year. So that's one level of inference that this movie works on, is actually referencing real things that may or may not happen in the real world. It's referencing Lewis Carroll. You hear things like being able to travel through mirrors and stuff like that. And that's a obvious Lewis Carroll reference. The kid in the story, when he was younger, he had a toy rabbit, and that's obviously a reference to Alice in Wonderland. But then there's a even higher meta level, and you probably already heard about this. There's multiple reviews of this show already on the internet. There's another level where you, the viewer, actually interact with the main character and decide how he does things throughout his day, from something as simple as choosing his cereal in the morning, or what he listens to on the bus on the way to the software company. But then it gets deeper than that. You're actually deciding for him through a use of an interactive menu through Netflix what decisions he makes when he's offered his job by the software company. And it's very interesting. If you were a kid in the 80s, there's a series of books that I read when I was in elementary school and probably maybe even middle school. I distinctly remember it being elementary school though, but they were called Create Your Own Adventure books. And what it was, you would read to a certain point in the book, and then you were presented a choice. If you chose A, the book would tell you to go to page 87. Or if you chose option B, the book would tell you to go to page 130. And from there on, you would continue this adventure. And basically, every time you read the book, you would have a different experience. Well, on one level, the character in the show is creating a game that's exactly like that, where you make these choices. But on the next level, the next meta level, you're actually controlling him. So it was a very, very weird experience by Netflix. And it's kind of hard to review because I've heard that there's up to like 3 to 4 hours of footage that they actually filmed for this episode. So as a result, your experience could vary. And I actually watched the show with my wife, and she was into it for maybe the first hour. And then, as you know, with Black Mirror, the show is very bleak. It got more and more disturbing as we went along. And my wife got to the point where there was actually, we're at a part of the story where we're going to have to choose whether to murder a person. And my wife was like, no, we're not going to murder this person. So, of course, that kind of killed her enjoyment from there on out, because as a result of not murdering this person, something even worse happens. So, the novelty kind of wore off for her, at least after that first hour. And she even said that when we finally finished, well, that was stupid. So it's kind of hard to review. I mean, if you're a person that has a history of these type of stories, it's more of a nostalgia trip than anything. And I enjoyed it for that reason. But I can see how some people might not like it. The show goes into some themes, just so many themes about art, nature, reality, about government control, about free will, which is obviously absurd because we all have free will. What, right? Hold on. Oh, God. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I just had a very strong urge to drink coffee just now. What was I talking about? Anyway, yes, I was talking about free will. So the show goes into different levels about free will. There's a hilarious discussion about, it was one of my favorite parts. So who starred in the show? Well, you're not going to probably not going to recognize most of the actors in this show. I did recognize two of them. One, Fionn Whitehead, who was in Dunkirk. I think that came out earlier this year, maybe last year. Had a very, I don't know if he had a small role or he was the main character, but I kind of remember his face. He's playing this main character, Stefan Butler. Another actor I kind of recognize was Will Poulter. He plays Connor Ridden, who is another programmer at the software company. So you're not going to recognize most of these people because I think Will Poulter, he was in those one of those Maze movies, and he hasn't been in much, but I did recognize his face. He has a very unique look. For some reason, he kind of reminded me of the kid on Game of Thrones who kind of betrays Jon Snow. But anyway, so I guess we're at a point where, what do I recommend? Do I recommend this be on your binge list? I have to say yes. I've read another review where a critic said this would open up a new era of television. And I think he's reaching a little bit there because we have interactive television already. They're called video games. So the fact that he would say that was kind of hilarious to me. We've had video games. I mean, the fact of the show is it's about video games. You know, his paradigm shifting game withstanding, it's still a video game at the end of the day, and we've had those for what, 30 something years. So I do think it was interesting, and that you should experience it for your own. But like I said before, the novelty kind of wears off a few minutes. Well, not even a few minutes. About, I would say, 30 minutes to an hour in. And I don't see it really catching fire because the amount of work that was involved in making this movie had to be tremendous. Because I read a little bit of backstory about how they made the show, and it was kind of like a Venn diagram that they had to keep documenting every step that you could possibly make in the game, and it just got so cumbersome for them to keep track of everything. So I don't think it'll catch on for that reason. And if you know anything about the create your own adventure books, they kind of died out in the late 80s themselves. So I don't think I've seen anything like that. I mean, people don't even read anymore, for one thing. But that whole genre of books kind of died out back in the 80s. So I don't see it being more of a novelty. Now, I could be wrong. I'm sure we're going to see some more of these from Netflix, because I'm sure at the end of the day, their viewership numbers are going to go through the roof, because there's so many different scenarios and endings. There's more than one endings. So make a note of that when you're watching. There are a lot of different endings to the show, and I can see somebody becoming obsessed with this, going back and just repeatedly watching till they see every permutation of this story. And that's interesting, but I don't, well, I can see it becoming a thing for a while, but like I said, we already have interactive games and create your own adventure type stories, and it's called, video games. So I would give it a recommend. Like I said, just for the novelty of it. I do have to mention that it does not work. This particular episode does not work with Apple TV and Comcast, because you have to have a pre-catch mode. The way it works, when you have two selections, your Netflix app of choice has to be able to pre-cache those two selections. And I think because of that, even the newest Apple TVs don't work. Because I tried it on my Apple TV, and I kind of got a message from Netflix telling me the devices I could enjoy the experience on. I'm not sure if you can go ahead and watch the episode. I should have tried that on my Apple TV. Maybe it'll give you just a streamlined version of that one story. I have to go back and try that. But it does not work for Apple TV and Comcast. Luckily, I have a smart TV, LG. So when I brought up the Netflix app, I had to do an update because I haven't used the apps on my smart TV in a long time. But I had to do an update, but it worked seamlessly. And the way it works is they give you two selections at the bottom screen, and you choose which one with your remote that came with your television, and you hit OK or enter or whatever is particular to your remote to make a choice. And it works fairly well. I didn't have any problems with it. But it's an interesting experience by Netflix, and man, just they're hitting on all cylinders right now. I heard that they said that Bird Box, which is what I reviewed last time, well, actually was what I reviewed before my Kevin Spacey video. Anyway, that show actually garnered something like 45 million views. So it was one of their most successful movies to date. So Netflix is doing very well. They're going to have a lot of competition coming their way. So it's encouraging to see all this innovation from these companies. But that's all I got for today. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give me a like. And I will see you when I see you. Thanks for watching.